Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I am your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and today we're going to talk about making space in our lives for the creativity and the freedom that ultimately all of us crave. As it turns out, it often takes discipline and commitment to a system for that clearing to happen. I am both honored and thrilled to have two very special guests on the show. David Allen, creator of the Getting Things Done system, is with us. His book, Getting Things Done, has been published in over 28 languages, and his system, known as GTD, has helped millions to make space in their lives. As it turns out, the story behind GTD is loaded with adventure. Also with us is Julie Ireland, my coach with GTD Focus, the exclusive partner for the delivery of GTD individual coaching for the US and Canada. This is a very special episode for me because the GTD system and a handshake with David years ago led to a series of synchronicities, which resulted in the creation of this podcast. And David and Julie are heroes to me, and I just can't wait to share them with you. David, Julie, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks for the invitation. Yay.
I'm so excited. Guys, the GTD system is renowned throughout the world. You have so many different followers. You've impacted so many different people. Today's discussion is not going to go into detail about the GTD system because we want to talk about the results that it delivers. But for listeners, I would like to just maybe do a quick overview what GTD is for those that might not be familiar. David, could you give us your elevator speech for GTD?
Yeah, it's just a set of best practices about what you do to get stuff off your mind and get it done.
Yeah, and what are people going to find?
That's really it.
What are people going to find when they read the book?
Well, they'll find what they're already doing that probably works, that sort of validates that. A lot of people make lists. A lot of people get stuff out of their head, but they don't really do it, in a complete way. Most everybody listening or watching this keeps a calendar. And the question is why? Well, my head can't do it. Yeah, no kidding. Your brain wasn't designed to do that. So most people are using their head as an office, and it's just a crappy office. It didn't evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, and manage more than 4 things optimally. If you got more than 4 things in your mind, you're not going to take a test as well. You're not going to be as present with your daughter. You're not going to be as innovative, creative, or strategic as you'd like to be. Period. Don't shoot the messenger. I came up with that, 40 years ago, that your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them. But now the cognitive scientists have basically validated that.
The head is a crappy office.
It is.
That's it.
But that's the problem. Most people are trying to use their head as their office to remember, remind, prioritize, manage relationships, and it just doesn't work that well. And then they tend to be driven by latest and loudest, which is not your most intuitive, strategic place to operate from.
So the head is a crappy office. There is a solution, and we're going to get into that. And that's actually the title of our episode today. Julie, GTD Focus, tell us about that and the work that you're doing to deliver the GTD system.
Awesome. Well, delighted to be here. So GTD Focus, as you said, we're the licensed distributor of one-on-one coaching in North America. So we've been doing that for years. It was we incorporated GTD Focus, and David, you can share a little about the history, but it was probably about 10 years ago when you officially moved to Amsterdam. I think that's when we were all really under the same roof. And then David and Catherine Allen took a very big, wild adventure and moved to Amsterdam. So we kind of really took the work we were already doing, which is kind of the blend of the getting things done thought process and all the cognitive science aspect of it, and we incorporated GTD Focus. So that's sort of like my basic elevator pitch about it.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how the two of you came to work together?
I don't remember.
Well, I do.
Of course she does.
So I'll kind of try to give you the short version of the story, but like I had a very big adventure, which was my life. I was living in San Francisco. I had a very stressful, yet like wonderful corporate professional life. And I didn't have any of these skills or practices back then, but I was just unhappy and I didn't know what to do about that. So I took a big adventure. I moved to Los Angeles and lo and behold, met John and Kelly Forrester. They introduced me to getting things done. And it just so happened that David was doing a seminar in LA and knew nothing about it, like 0%. But I love to learn. And I like, they were really excited about it. So I went and I tell the story because first of all, something happened right in the beginning of that thing. Like I was sitting in the audience going like, what is this guy up to? I could feel the magnitude of it. And then we did the mind sweep exercise and I already felt better. It was like, oh my God, this one simple thing. And then we took a break after that. And I remember I was walking down the sidewalk on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica going like, whatever this guy is up to, I want to be a part of it. It planted a seed in me. And then, it was really through John and Kelly that I got to introduce to David and Catherine. And I was having lunch one day with Catherine and Alan Ojai. And like my famous quote was like, please hire me, all of my experiences in the future.
I love that. That is the best quote. Please hire me, all of my experiences in the future.
Just so you know, like it's all in the future, but I'm willing. And it was like, I kind of start to cry a little because I'm so grateful for that. That was a lot of me, getting outside of my head, following my intuition and my heart really. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the long story of it.
So Julie, just to kind of add on that though, like you're attracted to what you heard at this seminar, you kind of go through the motions, like
yep.
GTD is for you, but how do you go from, an implementer to leading a movement and coaching people through it themselves?
Well, like, David has said, and that I always describe to you teach what you need to learn. So, it'll be 19 years, David, if you can believe it, in August since I started, and I'm still as much the student as I am the teacher. So, there's the thing about getting things done. There's no end to the depth and breadth of this. It's like you just keep opening up, deeper channels. For me, the kind of discovery and uncovery of deeper, wider, open loops. I have all kinds of stories. It's so funny, David. I like a lot of my stories. You probably don't remember, but they were really some of the conversations we had and the kind of the profoundness that came out of that. Just like, that's just an open loop, Julie, and how to like work with that. I just continue to evolve and refine my practice and as I do that, and as all of our coaches do that, and all of the GTD trainers, we keep serving people more lovingly and powerfully.
Yeah. So I want to ask either of you really, who is this system for?
Well, anybody with a busy life that wants to stay more on top of it instead of buried by it.
Anyone with a busy life. Is there anybody you would say that book is not for?
People who don't want to change, don't want to grow, don't want to have their life any different than it currently is. They're satisfied.
They may be a little attached to reactivity. I don't want to say anything like negative about that, but I think there are probably some people that do kind of love the busy trap. It's sort of like that reactionary way of living and latest and loudest. They're used to that. It's interesting because I used to say that like, if someone's work was very transactional, they might not need this. So if, maybe someone working in a call center where it really is like work as it shows up and you do it, work as it shows up and you do it. But then I changed that because those people have homes to go home to and lives to live and kids with, homework and soccer games and birthday parties and legal, all that stuff to deal with. So
yeah, I appreciate your candor on that. The reason why I asked that question, honestly, is because I can't imagine somebody that doesn't benefit from this system. I do think it's for everybody. I think that in some circles, there is a perception that this is for, the very pragmatic engineer type, i.e. this guy right here, Scott. I deeply resonated with this, and people that know me as a pragmatic, that know me as an engineer, they think, oh yeah, like, of course, Scott's going to read that book and he's going to, go do a bunch of things. But there's so much more to this system. And it's really like what's behind this system that really attracted me. It's not about getting things done. And this was the whole thing. So David, apparently the seminars are working because Julie saw you at a seminar. And I first saw you at a Brian Buffini seminar in Richmond, Virginia back in 2019. And I'd love to just share, like, just for listeners, I think I shared this with both of you guys, but I'd read the book a couple of times. And then I came to the seminar because I loved the book, but I hadn't really, the idea of mind like water hadn't really clicked with me until I saw you talk about it on stage. And there was just something about that phrase, mind like water, that just like filled my whole body and said, yes, that's it. Like, Julie, you talk about that energy. Like, I got that too. And it was this idea of mind like water. So just to kind of fast forward, at the end of that seminar, we had an opportunity to have you sign our books, which we did. This is the copy right here. And from there, Julie found you. We went through this whole coaching experience, and it set in motion for me this whole series of synchronicities that we won't get into on this podcast. But honestly, with Julie's help, that ultimately led to the creation of this podcast. And now we're sitting here having this conversation, and it blows my mind. So I'm so excited about that. And I'm so thankful, but I'm curious, like, your thoughts on, like, if there is a perception that this is for pragmatic people only. Can you just speak to that?
I'm not sure what you mean by just pragmatic people. I mean, everybody's pragmatic. I mean, everybody wants to get stuff done, right? So I suppose you mean people who are engineer types or people who like to have a system to make things happen in that way. But come on, the basics of getting things done is just the basics of productivity. What are you trying to accomplish, and how do you allocate or reallocate your resources to make it happen? I mean, very good friend of mine, and Julie's too, Eric Mack, who homeschooled 5 of his daughters. I mean, these girls were like 2, 3, 4 years old, and he would bring them in for Christmas, before Christmas, and say, okay, let's brainstorm. How would you like Christmas to be? And they go to a whiteboard, and they would generate ideas. We'll have a tree, and we'll have decorations, and we'll do whatever. He says, yeah, but we don't have that now. What do you think we need to do? Oh, we need to get a tree. Oh, my goodness. So, people have often asked, how old does somebody need to be to get GTD? I say, well, how old do they need to be to catch what they want to have happen and what they might need to do to make it happen? I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old. Right. So it's really about that. That is outcome and action thinking. But we don't seem to be born doing that or knowing that. Maybe we are, and it's just, trained out of us at a very early age. But, Scott, you can hop out of your mom and say, gee, Mom, what exactly are we trying to accomplish? And what's the next step? Is that yours or mine? It's like you're not born knowing how to cook spaghetti or do the tango or speak Dutch. These are things you have to learn. And so learning how to manage your thought process so that you're focused on what you want to focus on, and then organize your thinking and your focus and your attention to make sure that happens. That's really what the getting things done process is about. So I don't know that it's relegated to only, yes, it did take off in the tech world, because tech people are almost as lazy as me. They're the hardest working people to create stuff that allows people not to work so hard. Kind of crazy. And they love systems that have no leaks in them. They love intact processes, and they love something that gave them the tools to turbocharge their favorite tools, because GTD, as you know, is system agnostic. Doesn't mean you don't need a system. You just need whatever system you will work.
Yeah.
And it allowed them to then turbocharge a lot of what their favorite tools were. So, so it took off in that world for sure. Yeah.
Julie, curious if you have anything on that.
Yeah, well, I guess there's so much I could say, but the first thing that comes to mind is then, like, the next piece of that is, oh, by the way, you're gonna if you have a body and you have any exposure to the world at all, you're gonna get a ton of input on a day-to-day basis, and you kind of need to learn how you're gonna manage that, because without some kind of system, or you're going to run the risk of just reacting to it and getting overwhelmed. Like, I remember Frank Soper, who is our CEO. We had our very first GTD Focus staff meeting, and he said, "What's our purpose? What are we doing?" And I said, "Oh, we are coaching people best practices with getting things done." But then I kind of really thought about it, and I said, "Well, I'm going to remember this exactly, but it was something like, we're teaching people that overwhelm is potentially just a choice. What if it's optional? And I'm not saying it's like you're going to just flip a switch or like download an app and that's going to happen, but we can learn how, first of all, sometimes I'll tell people, like, I don't want to be like getting things done is like the best thing, but the aspects and the essence and the practices are very road tested. And understanding the difference between a capture bucket, which is where new stuff is coming in, that then I'm going to have to make decisions about and organize that. I always tell people, like, you're already doing this. So you go to the supermarket and you get 2 bags of groceries and you put them on the kitchen table. You don't leave stuff there, right? You have to unpack and redistribute so that later on you're not trying to, cook a souffle rooting out of a grocery bag. Like, you're already doing this. It's just that, learning how to do this with information, not just groceries, and not to like oversimplify it, obviously, but it's like, it's a really important skill to learn.
So this is an adventure podcast, right? And the thing about it, the thing about this is, if you're so bogged down, if your mental office is so crowded, you don't have the space to even think about it, right? So I would love to, this idea that captured me all those years ago at the seminar, Mind Like Water. And I just wonder if we could talk about what that means. David.
Not over or underreacting to your life, to current reality. Water is appropriately engaged with its environment. It's not confused. It's fine. It could be rushing. It could be quite powerful. It could be calm. It could be whatever it is, but it's not confused. So the whole idea, I stole that from, I think, Bruce Lee's sensei, who said, "Bruce, you must be like water, powerful, calm, not over underreacting." And, I sort of love that idea. And the truth is that, with my experience in the martial arts and meditation and spiritual practices, I discovered the value of clear space. The value of clear space. If you're jumped by 4 people in a dark alley, you don't want 2,000 unprocessed emails hanging around your psyche. Right? And, some study said, look, if you get interrupted at work, it could take you 20 minutes to get back to what you were doing. If I was jumped by 4 people in a dark alley, I'm not taking 20 minutes before I decide the next punch. Trust me, it's that. But you got to be clear to then be able to be that appropriately engaged with whatever's coming at you and the surprises that are coming at you. That's why my second book was called Ready for Anything. It's like, okay, how do you get ready for the surprises coming at you? And they're coming. And so the best place to operate that from, or the best place to negotiate that from, is when your head is not distracted by a whole bunch of old business. Not old business meaning that you have to finish all the old business, but you need to be appropriately engaged with it. That goes there. I'm not going to do that yet, but maybe in 2 months I want to trigger a reminder of that. Oh, that's just reference material that goes there. So a lot of what I uncovered was, how do I take all that input? And by the way, the world is fine. Just look outside. It's not overwhelmed. It's fine. It's only, to your point, it's only you who've allowed, or to Julie's point, it's only you who've allowed the overwhelm to happen, because you've allowed all that input in there that you're still not yet appropriately engaged with yet.
Yeah. So I love that you said mind like water. I think my head goes to still water, right? A calm, but you made the point that it's not just about having still water, because water can be rushing. I wonder if you could kind of talk a little bit more about that. It's not just the still water that we're looking for.
Well, I use the image of the surfer. I've got a slide that just shows a surfer on a big wave, right? Water can look often like that, but the surfer's got an ankle tether tied to their board. So, surfers are out in wild water, right? They love it. In fact, they're going to go for it, right? And they're always going to fall off somewhere, but they just need to get back on quick. So it's not about always having life so calm and peaceful and tranquil or whatever, not at all. It's about discovering when you're off and then get back on. So, life can throw us off all the time. I'm off several times a day. I just know how to get back on pretty quick. Anytime you set some new goal, you're going to get off, because some new goal, you're already up to here. So some new goal means you got more stuff to do. Oh my God, which means you got to let some stuff go. You got to decide, is that better than this? What do I do now? So, it's not about always being on. It's about being able to be on when you need to.
Yeah. So David, this idea of mind like water, you said that's something that you stole from Bruce Lee's Guru, but obviously it resonated for you at some point. Do you remember like the time in your life when you heard that, or when it like kind of clicked with you and you kind of attached to this idea of mind like water?
I'm not sure, Scott. I was very attracted to the Zen aesthetic. Even in high school, I read Suzuki, I read Alan Watts. I just sort of loved that idea of simplicity and elegance. And I don't know, I was just attracted to that, maybe from another life or whatever. I wound up doing bonsai, and I wound up doing ikebana, flower arranging. And so the whole Zen aesthetic was always something quite attractive to me. When a friend of mine offered to teach me karate, I thought, that'd be cool, because I was not really that physical, up until then. I played a little tennis in high school, but not much else. But I was curious about the martial arts because it was so tied to the Zen idea. I said, okay, let me see what that's about. So I got into it from the more aesthetic, or the more spiritual aspect of it. But then I found out I really like hitting stuff.
There's a both and.
It was like really fun to be able to do that, and the power. But a lot of what I discovered was there was a lot of meditative, contemplative, reflective kind of time in the martial arts. So if you're really going to practice it, you need to be relaxed. You need to not be distracted. And so that sort of gave me what I then took as the image that I said, okay, that's what we need to get to out in this crazy world where we're letting 300 emails a day come into our psyche. How do you stay on top of it? So as my life, and I did this mostly for myself to begin with, after my many jobs and professions or whatever, I just became a consultant. So I said, how do I get clear about all this? And then I wound up meeting a mentor of mine for a couple of years, who taught me some of the key elements that became GTD. Get stuff out of your head. Decide next actions on all the stuff that have your attention, and then objectify that, put it out in an external system. And I went, wow. I mean, I wasn't really broken, but I started to implement what he asked me to do, or what he challenged me to do. And I went, wow, that's way cool. I didn't realize how much different life could be if you did that. So that just became a lot of the core of what I was teaching, consulting, and then wound up training.
Can you take us back? Because just to make sure that there was a little bit of a gap there in our internet. And I just want, so we talked about kind of this sort of fascination with Eastern culture, Eastern practices, and then this connection of meeting a mentor. I wonder if you could just kind of elaborate on that, sort of how that transpired from the Zen practice to the meeting of the mentor.
Well, I don't really know. I mean, by that time, I dropped out of graduate school. I wanted to go find myself and God and truth in the universe. I was an American intellectual history major in Berkeley in graduate school in 1968. And then I said, instead of studying people who were enlightened, let me go find my own. So I dropped out, went on the self-exploration path. That led me to martial arts, meditation, spiritual explorations, and so forth. And so that was sort of but again, I wasn't a rice bowl and cave kind of guy. I like good looking girls and Chardonnay and things like that. So I said, okay, how do I support a lifestyle? So I had to go get jobs. So I became a really good number 2 guy. So I helped friends who were starting their businesses, had small entrepreneurs and their small businesses. So I just walked in and looked, how can I help? What can I do? And I'm Mr. Lazy, so I just look at what they were doing. Go, how much easier can we do this? So I was looking at how they were doing stuff, and I say, well, I think we could get out of here a little earlier if we did this or that or that. And so now they call that process improvement. I just said, let's leave earlier, and then I'd fix it, and then I get bored and I go find another job. Then I discovered they call people that do that, they pay them something, they like consultant. Like, oh my God, now I are one, couldn't spell it, and so that was kind of how I got into that world. But again, because I had this experience with sort of the inner world that I was exploring, and the peace of the inner world, when you really got into that, and that the outer world tended to disturb that, but there probably could be a better way to do it. So the stuff that I was learning, I just learned I didn't wake up one morning with GTD. It was this long string of epiphanies. Mm-hmm. Well, that piece worked. Oh, that piece worked. Oh, that. And I did this mostly for myself. And then I turned around and started to use the same techniques and share them with my consulting clients, produce the same results for them. More stability, more control, more focus, more space to focus about the meaningful stuff. And wow, that's cool. Then some guy in the big corporate world saw what I was doing and said, we need that in our whole company. Can you design a training program around what you've come up with as opposed to just one-on-one? So I did. It was quite successful. And that thrust me into the corporate training world because they were the hungriest people for what I'd come up with.
And this is the path to GTD, but I would be remiss if I don't ask you, because this is the stuff that lights me up. David, you said, I dropped, I think you said you dropped out of graduate school because you had to go find yourself, God, the universe. And I'm really curious, like, what did you find in that exploration?
Well, God, truth, and the universe, at least my version of it. As best I can understand it. I'm still working on that. That's a big study out there. And I started having a number of experiences that you could call spiritual, but I use a small s on that, where I would be experiencing things that were internal that I hadn't. It's like, where did that come from? Oh my God. And, it changed my perspective on a lot of stuff. And to see that there were other worlds aside from the one we know materially that we exist in. And then I met a guy named John Roger, who, I said, well, we went one night to seminar he was giving in some church in Berkeley. And I went, oh, this guy seems to know what he's doing. He seemed to be ahead of me in terms of exploring whatever all that was about. I said, well, I'll hang out with him like I'd hung out with some other people to say, let me see what he knows, then I'll go find something else. Never found the end of what he knew after 50 years, you know. And so he checked out. He died, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever. But John Roger was my spiritual coach about all that. And so that sort of opened the world, and I had experiences internally, you know, on the other side in other spaces, in other realms, that was quite real as this, as you would be talking together now. And so kind of hard to deny that. And then I stopped kind of exploring out there, and then my life became a lot quieter and more internal. So I'm not a big proselytizer about all that. I'm happy to share, you know, what I know with people who are interested in it, but you know, it's quite a private game.
Well, we're interested here on this podcast. I wish we had like 2 more hours to delve into some of that, because I, for one, would love to hear more about it. Julie, you've had some similar experiences. I'd love to hear kind of your take on that.
Yikes. Well, it's funny as Dave is talking, and I'm just sort of reflecting on like my life before GTD, and maybe in a lot of ways, I don't know that I've ever said this before, but GTD is a bit of my spiritual teacher and my spiritual practice, because you know, it's really enabled me like a lot. When I was preparing for this and I was thinking about adventure and how like so much of my own adventure is my internal exploration, as David was saying, and how really getting to essence of some truth inside of me is what GTD has enabled me to do. And exploring those kind of inner paths, which then allows me to be more authentic out in the world and make better decisions about what matters to me and be more aligned with my values and be more creative and inspired. And, you know, I think it's like, I don't say this as a judgment, but before I was like a really successful person in the world. You know, I had a great view of the Golden Gate Bridge as my office every day, you know, all these things, you know, but inside I was so disconnected. I just didn't I didn't know what to do about that. And I couldn't even really name it. So like my body just kind of created some different like illnesses to try to get my attention like that, you know, and then, you know, lo and behold, you know, I met David and Getting Things Done, and I started to learn how to like process my outer world and how to actually learn what an agreement means. Because I kind of knew what that meant with another person. I just didn't know what that meant with myself and how disconnected I was with my own agreements, and how that created a separation and a sadness inside of me that was like there all the time. And, you know, I was very anxious. You know, people kind of, I did one of our little YouTubes about this. I was like, my identity was like kind of successful, but at the expense of like super high anxiety and worry. And that was just kind of my identity. Like, we love Julie. She's so great. Boy, she is like nervous. And I just thought that was who I was, you know, and all these kind of different layers and levels of what I've been able to actually learn how to manage. It's not, you know, I wasn't just like at the mercy of it. It was through my GTD / spiritual practice. I don't know. Am I answering your question? I feel like
you have. Can you like help like listeners kind of connect the dots on how that, like, because you've talked a little bit about how GTD's helped you open up to creativity.
Well, it's like the starting point is GTD. Like people come to us, I call it the mechanics, right? Which is like, how do I kind of keep my world under control not that I'm trying to control anything, right? I'm just trying to keep my agreements managed really well so that then I can have more space to think creatively. So I can have more space to listen. So I can have more space to connect. Like one of my my most treasured assets is my inner knowing and my connection to that my GTD practice helps me preserve that. And so, I think sometimes people have it kind of wired. Like if I become organized, then that's like a death blow to my creativity. Somehow like my wings are going to be clipped. I think a lot of people sort of run that assumption, but the opposite is unequivocally true. Once I kind of have my quote unquote act together and I can like really have a system to manage the agreements I'm making, I can walk away from it, or I can renegotiate it, or I can actually, like David talks a lot about making space, like to think about what's really true and what I want to engage in or what I might want to move away from. There's a practice to that. It's not just some like divine dispensation. Like it's, there's processes to follow, and there's like I don't really love this word, but a bit of a soft discipline to it, so that I know how to generate control when I need it, and I know how to generate perspective when I need it. Those are within my responsible, purview, so to speak. Am I talking too abstractly, or are you looking for like a practical?
Well, let me add to that, Julie. One of the things I've said is that you're most creative when you have the freedom to make a mess. But if you're in a mess, you don't have the freedom to make one. Like cooking. Like you walk into a messy kitchen, you don't have the freedom to go make another mess. You need to clean up your kitchen so that then you have the freedom to make a mess and create something you never created before and do whatever. So, it's so to Julie's point, look, you need to be clear to then give yourself the freedom to be unclear, which is where a lot of the creativity comes from. It's like my comfort with being weird, wild, crazy, out of the box, and that kind of stuff. Hard to do if you're already out of the box, or if you don't have a box, or your box is overloaded or whatever.
And you've heard the story, Scott. David, I don't know if you've heard the story, but I had like I say this really sincerely, like a lifetime open loop around creativity. My definition of that is artistic expression. So I was like the kid in school that like would like watch everybody like finger paint and like do all that stuff, and I was like sitting at my desk just waiting for the time to be over so I could just like, and that was a thing that was with me, and it would have been okay if it didn't make me sad. And I wanted to do it, I just couldn't do it. So fast forward, as I got into the book The Artist's Way, which was very transformative for me, which led to this conversation that David, you probably don't remember this. We were in Washington, D.C. We were kind of co-coaching company there. And, you looked at me like those eyes, they're like massive truth serum eyes. And you were like, what's going on in your life? And I was like, well, everything's great, but I'm not really doing anything creative. And I was kind of whining a little bit about it. And you were like, well, why don't you make it a project? Like, go find a class or something. And I was like, oh, all right. Ha 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 ha. Can we have another Chardonnay? Yeah, so I did. I made a project, which was to find, I think I was like very clear about the commitment. I was so nervous about it that I'm just going to explore painting classes or something like that, which led me to, a wonderful teacher, which led me to like these painting, I was like, I kind of went from like, the project was, explore my creativity to like find a storage room for my paintings. Like, but that came out of that conversation, which is like, what you want something to be different. Like, so what's the outcome? The outcome is I want to stop feeling sad and anxious about this like open loop. Okay, great. What's the outcome? What's the next action? And, I say this really sincerely, like now those open loops that come up for me, like I'm still feeling anxious about something, or like, whatever it is, it's like, what's the outcome? Is it something I can commit to, first of all? But if I can, what's the outcome? And then what's the next action? And now all of a sudden I got some momentum going. And, it can be, sometimes it's very difficult things. I've coached people through myself, you've heard some stories, Scott, but there's a way to, the freedom that's on the other side of that. And, to say that GTD has only allowed me to have a joyful exploration around, the 40-year open loop, which is like, I don't know how to be creative. There's not enough thank yous in the world for that.
I love this. And freedom. Let's talk about some of the benefits and the freedom. Like, both of you are adventurers in your own way. And David, I understand that at some point in your journey, there was a hitchhiking adventure. I want to know if you can enlighten us on this journey.
I hitchhiked from Istanbul to Karachi, in 1967, all the way across Turkey, all the way across Iran, all the way across Afghanistan, and then Pakistan. It's like, what the heck? I was on I guess my first risk and adventure was deciding to go to a college that had no grades, that supported a lot of independent study. And then I wound up connecting with a guy who became a great friend. He was my academic advisor, and he decided to fund me on a trip. I was headed to Crete to study some of the Cretan history stuff. But then I was in Istanbul, and I met some, really cute girl, and they said, "Hey, we're going east. Why do you want to go to Crete? Come on, go east. The drugs are better. Go further east." And I said, "What the heck?" So I, got rid of my suit and got a pack, and then she and I hitchhiked together. So that was just if I'd looked at a map, I never would have gone. It was just like, okay, let me just follow whatever this thing was that said, okay, let me go take that adventure. So I haven't done a whole lot of those. I guess if you, sort of backtrack, there were a number of things that I did that were sort of out of the box kind of things. But I wasn't a wild and crazy guy. I made good grades, and I was good friends with everybody. And, everybody thought I was successful as a kid anyway, in terms of all that stuff. So I wasn't like really out of the box, but I just made some decisions along the way. I decided to, for instance, to apply for a 1-year exchange program, American Field Service, when I was in high school, and take a year out. I got accepted, so I spent a year living with a Swiss family outside of Zurich and going to a Swiss school. And, that was kind of risky stuff to do. So, yeah, I've done a few of those kinds of things. And I don't know what the juice was that made me do it, other than I was curious, and that seemed cool, and it seemed like a cool thing to do. So,
I mean, that seems like a good answer right there. Because, to me, like on this podcast, we talk about the voice inside that calls us to adventure. And, sometimes we all need the nudge to listen to it and say yes. But you've just given us several examples of, a hearing of that. And can we not hear it louder if we have gotten everything out of our heads and we have that voice or that mind like water?
I don't know. I hadn't, those adventures I just talked about. I didn't have GTD. I wasn't doing any of that. So I don't know that that's required. I think it makes it easier to listen to the still small voice. I think, people have sometimes asked me that, David, if you had to give advice to your 25-year-old or your 20-year-old, what advice would you give? And I say, well, there's only one thing that occurs to me, and that is, I never knew there was an intuitive voice, as Julie mentioned, until I was in my late 20s and 30s, that there was a still small inner voice that I could pay attention to that was smart, that loved me, cared for me, had huge patience, didn't care how much I screwed up. It was always there, and I could always trust it if I paid attention to it. So that was a sort of a new aha to me, was that that voice was there. And obviously, learning what I learned and getting things done made it easier to listen to that voice. I mean, a lot of people can't tell the difference between intuition and indigestion.
I love that you said that, though, that you didn't discover this intuitive voice until your 20s. Like, do you remember the circumstances around that? Was it a moment? How did you discover that inner voice?
I don't know. I did a lot of drugs, just as exploration, not as escape, but I was just curious. I mean, come on, this is the 60s.
Curious.
And I was just curious, like, what's out there? What's up there? What's in there? And so that seemed to be a path that a lot of people were taking to find out something and discover something about all that. So maybe that was a little bit of an initiator of thinking about the inner voice. Now, I haven't done any of that since 1971, so that was a long time ago.
So for you, how has listening to that voice changed for you over time?
It hasn't. Still there. Still something I try to access when I can. And
so is it fair to say once you discovered it, you just learned to listen to it?
Yeah. Well, I learned to be quiet. The universe is always on. It never stops. All meditation is, and reflection and contemplation is you quiet down the materiality of your life so that you can pay attention to the other sounds and the other voices and the other messages. They're there. They're always there. Never found, I have a guardian angel, that's there whenever I ask. I just forget to ask a lot, so.
And Julie, you are no stranger to adventure as well. And when you and I first met, I think you were getting ready to go on a camping trip when we first met. I was like, okay, I know this is the person for me.
Well, it's funny. I, was thinking about how I don't really think of myself as adventurous. Like it's like an adjective I'm not really familiar with. And yet I was thinking about my godson, Quincy. He's 17 now, but when he was like 5, he made me this little plaque. It was like a 4x4 inch square. And it said, Julie, ! Creative! Adventurous! I think I treasure it because it was like, he was so little and he didn't really know me that well. And yet those are the 2 words he came up with, which I just think it's so funny. I was like, wow, I didn't say organized. But I do think it's a lot of that for me it's still following my intuition. It's like, what's my heart calling me into? What am I afraid of? That whole experience I had, that was a mastermind. It was a women's leadership mastermind. And the culmination was kind of the, like, we're going to take you out into the wilderness and kind of do that aspect of it. But like, to me, like, that wasn't really, it's funny. Like, I think maybe you and I just have a little different, reference point for it. That all was still very much like the inner exploration for me, and what I was letting at the time get in the way of me showing up in the full, it's like one of my greatest teachers is resistance. And like, bless you, David Allen, a million times over, David was the book. David and Catherine bought me the book, The War of Art. Signed copy of it by Stephen Pressfield. And, it's like the hair stands on my neck when I was kind of really angry about it at first. I was like, this is a crappy gift. Until I realized it was like the gift of a lifetime. And, how, it's like there's adventure and there's resistance, right? It's like, whose voice is a little louder, and that's been a humble journey for me.
It's wild. Well, I really appreciate it. The one thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here is that, we kind of started about talking about the different audiences, right? And we talked about the engineer and the pragmatic, but we've touched on the spiritual realm as well. And I feel like the GTD system and some of what we've talked about today really, to use the Eastern term, exemplifies the yin and yang of life, right? Because in order to find freedom, you have to have discipline. And I do feel like we kind of live in this sort of black and white world right now where it's either or. And I think that the world needs more of the both and. And I'm just curious if you guys have any kind of thoughts or input on that.
Well, from my experience in the martial arts, power is generated based upon your ability to relax. If you want to create a powerful punch, you can't already be stressed. You have to relax. Then you can make a very powerful move. But I mean, come and look at really, really, really good athletes. What are they spending a lot of time doing? Stretching, relaxing, getting ready to go out there to then perform at a high performance level. But the need for relaxation. And a friend of mine now wrote a great book called Brain Change, a physician and teacher in the University of Brussels, Theo Compernoli, wrote a book about brain change. And his rant was basically people are not letting their brains relax. And the relaxation of your mind, there's an archive part of your brain. There's a forebrain and there's the limbic brain. But then there's another part of your brain that needs to make sense out of all the complexity and weirdness and overwhelm stuff and inputs that we get just on a daily basis. That's why you need to sleep. That's why you need naps. That's why you need to rest. You need to stop and let your brain sort of reconfigure and recalibrate and refocus. And there's a part of your brain that needs time to do that. That won't happen by itself. And that's where a lot of people burn out, is they don't give themselves permission to do that kind of rest, relaxation, back off from the world. So backing off from your world, has infinite variety of benefits, for all of us. So, power comes from relaxation.
I love this. Julie, any thoughts on this?
It's like, I don't even know where to start. The first thing that occurs to me about yin and yang is a little bit like and maybe this is like, I don't know if this is accurate, David, you can comment, but like, I kind of look at also like the resonance with control and perspective. Like there's control, kind of keeping my work kind of under control so that I can have more perspective, and how those two things are that continuum. It's like a continual, ever kind of evolving process. And, paying attention, like sometimes I need more yin and sometimes I need more yang, but I'm doing that really consciously. And, I think most things exist in but that either or, to me, if it's like really too black and white, we're probably not seeing the other piece of it. So what am I doing that's keeping myself from kind of seeing that other aspect of that thing? Because I as much as I love the color black and I love the color white, I think most things, it's like always, everything is both.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I just want to say thank you guys to both of you, because you have impacted my life personally, deeply. We wouldn't be obviously having this conversation, sharing this with listeners, if we hadn't had this series of events that started all these years ago. And I'm deeply grateful for the system and what you guys have helped me with. David, you have a new book just out called Team, which I have devoured. And Julie's got her copy as well. And it's what I love about this is my day job is as a real estate broker, and I have a real estate team. And my whole team actually, we read a book every quarter. And a couple of years ago, we did Getting Things Done together as a team. And so now we've got even more content, but I love this because it helps bring all the individual aspects of GT together into like how to help a team perform. And there's some sections in here that really resonated with me, particularly with regards to having standards that everybody can agree to. But anything do you want to say about the book, David?
Well, it filled a gap for 40 years, people get GTD and they go, Jesus, I wish everybody around me got this. Life at work would be so much better.
Yeah.
If we could do that. And I never had the bandwidth or the opportunity or the inspiration really to try to create some sort of a manual about how to do that. I knew that these individual practices, if I walked into your team, first question would be, what's got your team's attention right now? What's not on cruise control?
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do about it? And who's going to do that? And where are you going to park the results of that? You know, so it's all the capture, clarify, organize, and reflect stuff just applied to the team basis. And, you know, my co-author, Ed Lamont, you know, our GTD partner in the UK, we were having lunch about 4 years ago in Amsterdam. And we just said, he's been working a lot more than I have in the last 10 years or so with senior teams that had been trained in GTD and then watching how that affected positively their culture around them. They said, you know, I don't think we need to leave this ad hoc to just happen. Why don't we dissect this and say, what are the elements that make for a healthy high performance team? And so we took mind like water and said, instead of mind like water, let's call it healthy high performance. That's sort of mind like water for a team. It's high performance. Sure, you're going to need to produce results, but it also needs to be healthy. You know, are the people healthy? Is the environment healthy that's keeping them there? They're not burning out. They're not dropping off, you know, because it's just too much. And you know, you got turnover and health also. Is the team available to reconfigure, reconnoiter, recalibrate, refocus based upon surprise and change that happens? And all teams are dealing with that now. You know, now you bring on 3 virtual subcontractors from Thailand, right, onto your team. How do you then integrate them, and how do you make sure that everybody's kind of singing off the same song sheet, if you will? And so we actually, and we spent 4 years now writing that book and really distilling. It seems all pretty simple when you read it, but it took a lot to try to pull this out of the air and say, okay, what are the real aspects of this that will be true 100 years from now, as well as now. So
Well, I think
we did it.
I think you nailed it. I mean, it definitely fills that gap from individuals with GTD to the team. Julie, GTD Focus. If people want to learn more about you, or how do they get involved?
Great. Well, you know, our website, gtdfocus.com, is a great starting point. You know, you can click a button and schedule a phone call, and you have all kind of great information there about us. And yeah.
Amazing. Well, you can get all of David's books anywhere books are sold. They're all fabulous. And you can get in touch with Julie, gtdfocus.com. Yep. And we'll include links as well. David, Julie, both of you have lived these epic lives. And I want to ask each of you individually, because I just know that at some point Hollywood is going to want to make a movie about each of your lives. And so, Julie, we're going to go to you. We're going to go to you first. When they do, I want to know who's going to be the Hollywood actress that's going to play you in your movie.
Well, it's so obvious. Can you guess? It would have to be Edna E. Mode from the Incredibles.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
there you go.
Clippity Clop.
I love it.
I mean, if she, you know, if you really needed a human, I probably would go with, who's the actress from Amelie, Audrey Tautou.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
She's kind of like my style icon. So yeah.
Okay. I love it. What's your movie going to be called?
Squares, a love story.
Squares, a love story. All right. I love it. I'm definitely going to watch that movie.
That's all I'm giving you.
It's going to be an artist's movie for sure. David, who's going to play you in your movie?
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner. Oh man. Great choice. I love it. What's your movie going to be called?
Confessions of a God-Seeking Baby Boomer.
Holy smokes. Confessions of a God-Seeking Baby Boomer starring Kevin Costner. I mean, Mike drop. That's amazing. That is amazing. Thank you guys so much for such a delightful conversation today. I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope David and Julie's stories have encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Julie, David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yay.